Okay, hello. So, welcome everybody. Welcome anybody watching the recording, but most of all, welcome to anyone joining us here tonight, and particularly our guest this evening, Barbara Smith. It's just lovely to see you again, Barbara. And yeah, I'm really delighted that we're doing this. As anybody who read the blurb is probably aware, Barbara and I have co-written a book over the last few months, and it's on the topic of addiction. One cause, one solution. I'll get that right this time. And it's been a really enjoyable and fulfilling process. And that book in turn was partly prompted by our common interest in an upcoming conference on addiction from a three principles perspective called, I've got it written down just so I get the wording right, called The Principles of Addiction Recovery, and that's taking place in May this year, the 14th to the 16th of May in St. Paul, Minnesota. So there will be information about that in the notes to the recording on YouTube if anybody's interested in that. So that's kind of the business side of it, the housekeeping. Rather than me say anything else about you, Barbara, and your story and this whole process of writing, why don't I just hand it over to you to say whatever you would like?
Okay, and we can go back and forth. So, I was trying to remember the other day, Christian, how we decided to do this. I mean, I don't know, I don't know who asked who, but I think we were both feeling fairly frustrated with being able to see more clearly a way to share the principles, these three principles, and this new understanding and this new paradigm with people who are struggling in early recovery or people who'd even been in recovery for a long time. So we both were really at a place, I think, in our own work with addicts or recovering addicts, where we were really feeling the need to come up with a better approach. Help me out here if you can think of a better word, but we were really questioning the effectiveness of what was out there.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know I was sort of drawn to you the first time I heard you speak, and perhaps I sensed that that we had some kind of shared perspective on, because I think what we both have, but from slightly different viewpoints, are a lot of experience in the world of addiction recovery and a significant grounding in the three principles paradigm, and we could see. I think I knew that I wanted to write something about that. I remember just, one of us, we were on a call like this, but I think we were both guests, and one of us was saying, I'm thinking about writing something, and the other one said, I'm thinking about writing something, and somebody suggested, well, what about doing it together? And it just seemed to be that seemed to be the start of what's been a whole process of just finding that things flowing very naturally. And yes, my sense was I had a particular interest in people like me who had been in recovery and were drug or alcohol free for a long time, but were still struggling with the business of life, which was me before I discovered the principles. And I felt I wanted to write something that might save people some the years of struggle that I had had. But I was very interested in your perspective as a professional in the field, and I felt that there was something that there could be something gained by bringing the sort of user's experience, as it were, and the professional experience together.
Right, and it worked beautifully. I agree that our experience was really quite remarkable in terms of the way it worked, and you know, just seeing what's possible with this understanding. You know, it was seamless. So many people have said to me, oh my gosh, what was it like to write with a co-author? Like, that must have been just awful. And I said, no, actually, it was remarkable, because neither one of us got into our egos. You know, we just were clear that we wanted to share something that we had seen, and we wanted to, we both knew we sort of developed our clarity as we went along. So there were a lot of times where I would write something or you would write something, and we'd take a look at it and we're like, no, that's not it. And then we'd sit there, we go, what are we saying? What are we saying? You know, it was this really amazing process of, you know, just really searching for the deeper truth and a way of expressing it that was accessible to people, you know, because people who are in early recovery, particularly, I mean, this is a large part of my practice, is people who are in early recovery have very toxic brains, you know, and so if you start talking to them about things that, you know, aren't clear, you lose them. And, you know, it may take a lot longer for them to ultimately get to the truth of it. So the focus we had was to just really try to have, you know, to put out something that was accessible, that was clear, that was concise, that was easy to read, although we just got the first hard copy books and they're tiny little print, which was not our intention at all. But there is a lot of space between the paragraphs, but the print's a little bit small. But, you know, we just wanted to make something that people could read. And I think we did a great job, because we were a team in a way that, again, I'd never experienced teamwork before. Just to say, you know, neither one of us are shrinking violets, let's just put it that way. And so when one or the other of us was on the wrong track, we'd say, no, you know, that's no. And the other one would go, you're right. Or no, this stays, you know. And it was, you know, it was really just quite remarkable. We really, I think both saw it from different perspectives. My opening and in my insight with the first insights into the principles was really coming from a psychological perspective, which is no mistake considering I've been a psychotherapist for 40 years. And Christian had a much more spiritual experience of it. And even that worked. I mean, it was like we were bringing both of those together. And as the whole thing unfolded and we were able to just, you know, get it clear and be clear what each other's strengths were and where we could, where we needed to say things more clearly, it just came to fruition in 4 months. I mean, that's really the incredible thing to me. I wrote somewhere online the other day that it was a year, and she pointed out to me, no, it really wasn't. It was 4 months. And that's, you know, that's pretty cool. So.
Yeah. And as you say, Barbara, it is testament to the you know, the power of the principles, how it plays out at a very practical level. You know, I was talking to a guy that I met recently. He was a coach, and he was asking me about the process of. It was the day that it was been first published. It was about 10 days ago, the ebook. And he's saying, "So did you have lots of goals?" And I say, "Well, no, not really. We had a broad goal that we wanted to get most of the writing done before Christmas." You know that, but it genuinely is this very different way of approaching life, of coming from inspiration and certainly in my case, a less cluttered mind and less preconceptions, and that it does actually play out in the world. It does make everything easier, and just having, also as you say, having the capacity to. I mean, I like that early on we just decided that we weren't going to get caught up in I'm doing more than she is, or I'm not pulling my weight. Just we knew there would be imbalances at different times, and we just live with that, and kind of just park that right away, and so that wasn't a thing. And yeah, it's one of the most enjoyable and fulfilling things that I've done in my life, really, and it was very affirming in terms of what I already knew about recovery and what I already knew about the principles, and also very affirming in seeing more as we went. I found a real learning process, and that was lovely as well. Really.
Yeah. Learning and an evolution. I mean, I watched both of our thinking around this evolve as we went through it. We'd write something and then we'd be like, no, that's not it. Or I would write things that I've been talking to clients about, about time being a healer. And you're like, no, it's not time. That's not how it works. And I was like, you're right. So I think we learned and grew from each other as we went through it. And, I just want to tell a funny story because I think this is just so classically sort of what happens. Christian, we had agreed, I think before we decided to write the book, but I'd invited her to visit me at our home in the Azores, which are some islands out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And Christian said, sure, I'd love to come visit you. So we made plans for her to come visit in October. And she got off the plane and we were going to write a little bit while she was there, but, I was thinking I'd show her around and, she gets off the plane. She looked a little green around the edges. And I was like, are you okay? And she said, yeah, I get a little motion sickness. She said, but I'll be fine as long as the roads don't do this. Well, if you've ever lived on a mountain, that's all the roads do. So I thought, okay, well, we're going to be not going very many places. So we didn't. We literally had a week of just writing and walking and reflecting and quiet, and it was really that was just funny to me. I tell that story all the time. It's like, okay, well, I guess we're just going to be writing this week, and not going to be doing too much sightseeing. So
that's a great example of separate realities, Barbara, because somebody just said to me today, so so we're doing it all the time, and I said, no, not really, and I said the first week we were only doing an hour a day.
That's true. You were much more focused than I was. Yeah, that's true. So why don't we talk a little bit about the book and what we tried to put out there. And
yeah, I'm very open to any questions. I mean,
absolutely.
not about anything at all, or any contributions. Please do, unmute yourself or raise a hand if you want to come in. We'd love to hear from you too.
Yes, please do.
Yeah.
Please do.
Yes, but in the meantime, no, please, Barbara.
No, I just was going to say that I think, again, both of us are very practical people, and we wanted to give people sort of not a how-to, because there is no how-to, but we wanted to spell things out in a way that was accessible to people, to ground them in the truth of what we call the single paradigm, or the three principles paradigm, which is just a clear way of how things work versus how they don't work. And the title of the book is One Cause, One Solution. And people always ask me, well, what's the solution? Somebody asked me that at a meeting last night. Well, what's the solution? I said, well, that's not really a 5-minute conversation. But basically what we're saying in the book, and I think this is so important, is that so much of addiction is really grounded in the misunderstanding of where our feelings come from. And the single paradigm is so clear in terms of just setting out, how that works, and how we've just been misled by a very common misunderstanding of experience that has, kept people searching in the wrong place forever for the source of their unhappiness, the source of their suffering. And I think as a psychotherapist, what I really wanted to speak to was what I have come to see in the field of psychotherapy, which is just there has been this innocent misunderstanding that we have taken people on the wrong road to recovery so often. So I think in this book, we've sort of, in some ways, I said this to Christian, you do realize we're going to like piss off half the people in Three Principles. We're going to piss off the recovery community and the mental health community. And she goes, yeah. I said, okay, just as long as we're clear about that. Because, you know, we just, I did not intend to take people, you know, examining their past and their trauma and all of that intentionally to continue their suffering. But now in retrospect, I can see that in some ways it did. Not always, you know, not always. Some people got better despite me and despite some of my interventions. But for many people, I just really felt like I needed to correct that. I needed to speak for myself and from the experience that I'd had as a therapist and correct that misunderstanding and say, you know, we were wrong. I mean, we really had it wrong, particularly when it came to the whole idea, and Christian, you can talk more about this, but the whole idea of brokenness. And the whole idea that you needed somehow to be attached to me or to some practice or whatever to live a whole and happy life. And until I think as psychotherapists we can stand up and say that and you know, unashamedly so, you know, I don't think we're going to be helping people, you know, and a lot of people don't want to give that up. You know, they really want to believe that they have all these character defects and dual diagnoses and everything else, and they're broken and that's it, and this is for life, and till death do us part. You know, there's not a lot we can do about that, but I can certainly correct my end of that wrong roadmap that I laid out innocently because I promulgated what I'd been taught and I never really questioned it. So I felt like that was my goal in that, was to really clarify that.
Yeah, it's interesting, Barbara, because I think there is a sort of mitigation, if you like. I was just talking to, in fact, Lucy, who's on the call earlier today, as someone who was an alcoholic who had a drinking problem, I really was in denial of it until the last few months of that problem. I mean, and by that, what I mean is, you know, just to be crystal clear, I didn't know I had a drinking problem, despite the evidence being overwhelming. So there was a period. There was a period towards the last few months of my drinking where I was trying to know the horrific possibility had dawned on me that I might have this issue, and I really didn't want to have this issue, and so I was trying to prove to myself that I didn't. And then there was a moment of, you know, massive insight and clarity, you know, a sort of rock bottom moment that where everything changed. But there was this past history of not being able to trust my thinking, and so being very willing to just, you know, believe whatever, and to classify that denial as the symptom of a disease. You know, it sort of made sense. You know, I just, you know, it was a very inexplicable phenomenon that had occurred, and you know, why couldn't I see it for so many years, and then all of a sudden it was dawning on me, and so the whole notion, which I bought into, you know, wholesale, that I was broken, that I was damaged, that I had a mental health disorder, it just seemed like humility. And that's, you know, the user's perspective, but I can see why the professional dealing with, you know, a bunch of, you know, sort of alcoholics like me, that you know, that it seems to have some credibility, you know, in the absence of the explanation that the principles give, you know, before that. So, but like you, I wanted to offer people coming into recovery now freedom from the consequences of buying into that false belief, because it wasn't neutral. You know, it played out in my life for the next 20 years. You know, innocently and unwittingly, but I lived as though I was someone who was, you know, broken or damaged, or, you know, had a you know, sort of emotional or mental health issue. And the moment I discovered the principles, there was just a sort of realization, oh, that's just all wrong, and things changed, you know, from that moment onwards, with the result of the last 10 years has been completely different.
Yeah. One of the things I said in the book was that I was taught the disease concept, and I just, even though I didn't really understand the disease concept, I would ask my my bosses and my mentors and people, like, well, why is this a disease again? And then I would just sort of repeat that, like, oh yeah, it's a disease because it's like, it's like diabetes. If you don't take care of it, then it'll come back. And so I would work really hard to convince people of that, even though I didn't really buy it. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, but I was like, okay, you've got this thing and you're going to have it for the rest of your life, and you have to do all these things to take care of it. And if you don't take care of it, then it's going to come back and it could kill you. And so a lot of people didn't buy into that. And I just really pushed my agenda on them. And I really, I would argue with people for years. They'd say, what do you mean I can never have a glass of wine even though I smoke pot for, if you, no, you absolutely can't. You've got this disease and your father had it, and so I think that, again, there is no one size fits all recovery. We can be led intuitively through wisdom teachers that are all around us to finding our way out of the fix in which we find ourselves. And when you can start to see that and not just buy into someone's take on what is, in their perception, the causation of it, and you give them a principle, a very clear operating system, or a very clear roadmap of sort of how we got into this place, it offers people freedom like nothing else. And freedom from a lifelong sentence to a moment-to-moment creation of experience that is new and fresh and always presenting itself. So I would like to hear how this is falling with people, if anybody has any questions, or they're ready to hang up or get angry or cheer us on, or wherever you are. If you have any, you don't have to, but if you do, please feel free. We can take it. Yeah, Wendy, hi.
Hi there. So I am completely on board with pointing in the directions of the three principles as a way, a new set of glasses with which to see the world and with which to understand how I process information and how and I'm also grateful. I am a grateful, quote unquote, recovering alcoholic. I've been in the halls, as they say, for coming up on 15 years in March, and haven't had a drink since then, which I guess is a feather in my cap. So it's interesting to me. What I'm curious about is for what your experience has been with card carrying program, 12-step program people, because there's so much synergy with the program, the 12-step program, and 3Ps with stinking thinking and you know, it's our thoughts that are getting us into trouble, and, you know, it's not the other person, it's, you know, me. But if it's me, what AA says is it's me and I'm broken. And once I get unbroken through the 12-step process or through some recovery of my right mind, then I can. So I see so much synergy, and yet that, like you said, the disease model is so prevalent in the conversation around AA. Have you had any experience with actually talking with card-carrying AA people who say, oh, I get what you mean, I'm not fundamentally broken, and stinking thinking is getting in my way, and it's just another way of talking about the 3 Ps, stinking thinking. Am I being clear in my question, which is, have you found 1, 2, 17, 35,000 people that have agreed that said, oh, I'm getting clarity on this, it's not that I'm broken, however, I have been looking in the wrong direction about correcting or helping my stinking thinking? I hope I'm being clear.
Mm-hmm.
Christian, you want to tackle that? You want me to?
I'll say something briefly, and
Yeah.
and then I'll hand it back to you. Wendy, yeah, I mean, there are people on this call who I think are in that category. I'll let them out themselves or not if they choose to, but yes, I think that there are people who are, you know, really receptive and have a similar experience to me of, you know, some burden being lifted, that they and what we very much didn't want to do in the book was say anything to kind of diss AA or, you know, suggest that, you know, yes, I think that a lot of people that each of us has worked with have found benefit. There are others who are really not interested, and to be honest, I haven't so much had hostility, Barbara, as just it's as though you hadn't said anything. I wrote a book, nice weather. You know, it's just that's been my experience. But Barbara, how would you respond to that?
I guess I would say that there's been a whole range of experience, Wendy. You know, there's, again, no, I had one guy who'd been in AA for 35 years. And in our first session, he was like, oh my God, it really is all thought, isn't it? You know, and then, you know, he stopped going to meetings. He's doing remarkably well. He's just feels so relieved to not have to keep doing the endless, you know, setting up his whole life around AA. It's just, he just was free, and he, you know, just, you know, it's been remarkable. I just spent an hour with a client who is deeply, deeply, deeply connected to AA and Al-Anon, and goes still, after 35 years of sobriety or something, goes to regular meetings. And, you know, and she was just saying, wow, you know, this has changed me so much. I just got a new sponsee who said she was watching some of Brene Brown's, and she said, I heard this voice say, no, you need to be reading, you know, we need to be reading 12-step, you know, program literature. And, you know, and then she said, wait, what am I doing? You know, and she said, well, you know, so she turned to this woman and she said, why don't you come over and we'll watch this video of Brene Brown's, you know? So it's changed her, even though she still is all in with the program. It's changed the way she sees the work that she does as a sponsor and her own spiritual deepening in the program. Then I've had other people, I literally had 2 people, and some of you may have heard me say this before, I've had 2 people who actually ran out of my office, one of who was screaming, I can't learn this, I can't learn this. You know, it seems like such a threat to what they've been taught.
Interesting.
That literally happened. I kid you not. This woman ran screaming from my office. It so terrified her that that this was somehow going to undo what she perceived was saving her and keeping her sober. And I had another woman who said the same thing. She just, I laid out the single paradigm for her, and she said, no, this is too much of a threat to my recovery. I won't be back. So I don't know that there's one way. Again, it's all our perception.
No.
Right?
I was just curious about what some of the responses have been, because I know I still go to one meeting a week just because the fellowship is terrific and my friends are there and so forth. And I find that what I hear when people qualify, as we say in the halls, when people speak, what I hear and the wisdom that comes through what they say or what I perceive is so different, qualitatively different, since the 3 Ps. What I perceive as recovery or inner wisdom or insight it pops all the time in an AA meeting for me. And I'm able to call it that. I'm able to say, wow, that's just amazing. There's a great story, you had never heard it, but the people in AA have heard it all the time. We have this married couple that came in. They're like under 30 years old, and they were living under a bridge in Boston on cardboard, homeless, smoking crack all the time, married to each other, and just completely homeless and in bad shape. And then one morning she said, I went to the bathroom and here's the stick and I'm pregnant. And he said, really? Oh, he said, well, you're my wife and you're not going to be sleeping on cardboard after tonight. And neither one of them touched a drop or a drug in 4 years, in 2 years since that day. And I hold that up as I said, that's one thought. That's 1 nanosecond where everything just opened up and they were able to go in the direction of health and well-being rather than not. And so I said, there it is, inner wisdom showed up, so I'm able to see it and spot it and call it out. And I have not yet found a place where I feel, except, when some of the older people say, you got to clean out the ashtrays, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to show up, you got to sponsor, you got to do all these external things in order to get recovery. And I'm like, no, you don't. But anyway, I digress. But anyway, that's kind of what I was wondering about your own experience. I have my experience with the 3 Ps and the 12-step world. I was just curious about yours. So thank you.
The thing that we wanted to really talk about, as Christian said before, was we really wanted to show, and I think we did a talk a while ago, called The Bridge of Wisdom, that I feel like that there's so much wisdom in 12-step recovery. There really is, as there is all around us. Catherine and then I just did a workshop, and you can draw on everything, mystics from the beginning of time. I mean, there's wisdom everywhere. What the principles help us do is to just discern truth. And so I, like you, I hear these things now and I'm like, oh, there it is. Oh, there it is. Oh, there it is. And you just see it so much more clearly, and it comes to life in a way that is so powerful. Rather than this idea that, no, we have to do these certain things in order to be okay. I think the wisdom just kind of pops now. That's my experience too. And I would say that's the experience of the majority of the people that I work with who are in recovery, is they can, rather than being turned off maybe by the God talk, or whatever walls they put up, can start to listen more carefully for some of the wisdom so they can discern that more. And that just in and of itself begins to change people's lives, I think.
Yeah.
Did you have anything, Christian?
Yeah, I was thinking, there's a thing that Sid used to say, and I've heard him say it in various different ways, that in kind of encouraging people to go back to their churches and to see the truth behind the dogma. I don't think he put it exactly like that. And for me, that's been this. AA would never describe itself as a church. It's very, clearly, open to anyone, spiritual, religious, or agnostic. But it is that same thing. I have found, because in the period before I came across the principles, I was increasingly uncomfortable. There was something that wasn't adding up. I was trying so hard and still struggling so much. And today, like you, I enjoy going to a meeting, Wendy. There's one in particular. I can go to a Sunday night sort of meditation. It's an hour, and I can just go into exactly the same place that I would go into in a 3-piece training, sort of semi-trance, dwam, and meditation. And if I do share something, I try and speak from the heart, but do it in a way that's non-controversial, so I don't feel the need to say that's nonsense and don't talk about that, and I think, Barbara, you and I talked about this from time to time, that we could see that goes back to that bridge of wisdom thing, the value of somebody who has that solid recovery in terms of, freedom from chemicals, but also having a sort of grounding in the principles is immense. And it also seems to me that Sid's work and how, as it's been developed by other teachers, including all of us here on this call, really is an evolution, and that some of what's happening in recovery today is dogma, and it's actually moving away from some of the spiritual insights and truths that the founders and the early people were writing about. So I think both Barbara and I without wanting to sound too grandiose, but I think that we were motivated, that there was an element of service, wanting to sort of share what we saw as truth and to do it from that place of service. It's certainly not anything. We're not anticipating that we'll be retiring on the proceeds of our book. Let me put it that way. We wanted to share what we know in probably in the same manner that we work with our clients, to offer what we've seen, and kind of take we like, leave the rest. Sonia.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I want to congratulate you and Barbara for a fantastic book. I have to say, I said to you, Christian, I had picked it up on the Friday night and I didn't put it down till the Sunday morning because it was so good. The language and the way that you were sharing, the understanding, I thought was just fantastic. So first of all, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And I do believe that somewhere on the evolutionary scale that will become a bestseller, and evolutionary in its own right. Because for me, it confuses me that, I know that I remember I was on a webinar call with Joe Bailey one time and the work that he was doing at the Gulf Breeze Recovery. And he said that the percentage of people who were recovering was something like 72%, as opposed to on this 12-step program, which was about 10%, and yet nobody seemed to be paying attention to it. So the word you used, Christian, was evolutionary, and I think that people either need to be in that place to hear this in lots of ways, that they're in a place of seeing that there is an old way, that spiritual way of looking at things that now has a modern twist to it, if you like, which is saying you're more than you think you are, and that you're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. And I loved the way that Joe Bailey talked about it. They weren't there as patients; they were there as guests. And I have real hope that this evolutionary phase that we're on will take hold sooner rather than later. But as well as that, my concern is it just seems to be taking time for people to really see it. So really, the main point I'm kind of making is that it's an evolutionary thing. We're on the right path, and you guys are out there at the forefront of that, trying to do your damnedest to get it out there. And people who are ready to listen will hear this on such a deep level. So congratulations is all I can say.
Thanks, Sonia. Thanks. Barbara.
It's so rewarding, to hear when you put so much into something, Sonia. I mean, I think we both can say that we poured a lot of ourselves into this book, and it's so rewarding when people see it. You know, so thank you so much. It really means a lot to us. It really keeps us going, despite all of the complications that we're both experiencing with the publishing of this, and next will be the taxes and royalties, and you know, in 2 continents, and you know, it's very complicated. So we're making our way through, but that kind of feedback really helps, and we appreciate it so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Mike?
Sheila has her hand up.
Sheila and Mike, okay. Sorry.
Okay, I think Sheila's been waiting for a little while.
Sheila, okay.
Oh, hi there. I wasn't very sure how to work that. Hi. I'm looking forward to getting the book tomorrow. It's on order and should be arriving tomorrow. So I may be speaking about things that that are already covered in the book. However, the question that I had was, did either or both of you use the term, any other terms apart from alcoholic? I come from the position of being an ex-addictions worker, and I always steered away from alcoholic, just instinctively, and also I suppose through my training as a social worker as well, because I felt that people assumed a sort of identity, and by virtue of an identity, a lot of thoughts that go with that. Now, the reason I'm thinking about this is I'm about to work, I'm a coach now, and I'm about to work with somebody who's trying to be abstinent and has identified that alcohol is a problem in her life and it doesn't bring much to her. But in our first consultation, she was talking about, it's almost when she has the feeling, she thinks it's inevitable. She hasn't traced it back to the original thought yet, but it's a feeling and it's just going to be fulfilled. For instance, what she says is something like, if I know I've got a party on Friday and I know inevitably I won't be able to stop drinking, I just start on the Tuesday. So that may be a long garbled way, but I was wondering, I mean, I'm going to work with her a lot in thoughts and help her I'm going to introduce her to the 3 principles, because I did see, I did hear a lot of thinking going on that was affecting her, and I checked and she didn't have a physical addiction at present. So how much do you think people assuming this identity and some of the language that goes around it leads to the thought self-fulfilling? Does that make sense?
So are you to answer the very first question, we did, I was just trying to find a bit, we did sort of define terms. I mean, you know, we said we were talking about alcohol and drug abuse, so we've used that interchangeably, and we defined that as things like, you know, not being able to stop once you'd started, not being able to stay stopped, not being able to follow through on your resolutions, or your use bringing unwanted consequences into your life. So I can't remember exactly what we said, but it's around that. I mean, I think we have used the word addict and alcoholic fairly liberally. To my mind, if somebody hadn't already, essentially it's loss of control to my mind. And if somebody hasn't already lost control, to my mind, reading those words is not going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It has also been my experience, and I'll let Barbara, you know, tell hers has been, but it's also been that in my experience, when someone is beginning to seek help around alcohol or drug abuse or misuse, they've probably got much more of a problem than they've already realised, you know, in all innocence. And especially here in Scotland, Sheila, you know, I just think we live in such an alcoholic, and I use that word deliberately, you know, where it's the one drug you have to apologise for not taking, and people will openly say things like, you can't trust someone who doesn't drink, and things like that, or I used to be fun, you know, so, yeah, I'm not overly concerned about that. You know, we just thought we wanted to be direct and straightforward and not pussyfooting around. And it is such a huge killer. I mean, much more so than drugs that get all the attention. But yeah, I mean, in terms of back to alcohol. So those are some of my thoughts. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's interesting. I just wanted to know, as I say, I'm a social worker of the 80s, and I always remember at uni it was the movement to start calling alcoholism problem drinking, and it was a useful social model, because like you're saying, in Scotland, a lot of people would get out of confronting what was happening in their life by saying, but I'm not an alcoholic. But if you could say, well, you've got a financial problem, you've got a marital problem, you've got a health problem, you've got a driving problem or whatever, and it is caused by alcohol, then very often you could get somebody earlier to acknowledge that it was an issue in their life, you know. So I guess that's just where I was coming from. But and I was just wondering the relationship about the words I would use, quite apart from the introducing this woman to the 3 Ps, the words I would use that wouldn't be kind of like programming her to think in a certain way, you know, around alcohol. That's cool. That's very helpful. Thanks.
What are your thoughts, Barbara?
Yeah, I think, Sheila, one of the things that we purposefully did, I, like you, were trained in that model when I was in graduate school in the 70s. And I talk about this a lot in the book, or I've talked about this online. We weren't allowed to diagnose people when I was in social work school in the 70s. It was considered a label that would follow people for life. And so, you know, we really, you know, I hear what you're saying, and, you know, that's how I feel about so many of the mental health diagnoses. But I think Christian and I made a very, very conscious decision to be very clear about the seriousness of addiction. I mean, both of us, well, certainly I have worked with many people for whom it has cost them their lives or the lives of other people. And we didn't want to sugarcoat that. We didn't want to just say, oh, it's just a habit, you know, it's just a bad habit that you develop. No, this could kill you, and it does kill people all the time. And so we really, we took that on and we called it what it was in our perception. That being said, there is a whole chapter on breaking down identities. You know, that you are not your alcoholism, you are not this addiction, you are not this, and you are so much more beyond that. But I think we both really felt very strongly that we didn't want to sugarcoat the consequences of what this means. I mean, I used to work at a clinic in Washington, D.C. I watched people murdered and slaughtered and, you know, eating each other's dogs. And I mean, like horrible consequences of this, you know, problem. And so I think we were very comfortable in labeling it as a serious issue and calling it an addiction. And again, and then taking apart and dismantling the whole concept of identity, that somehow has to define you. So I hope that helps. That's how we saw it. I think.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Barbara.
Okay. You're
sorry, I muted I'm accidentally muted myself. Sorry about that. You just reminded me, Barbara, that one of the things that occurred to me is that of course what we're pointing to is that, you know, ultimately people drink because they believe it's going to give them some relief. And the thing that they don't realize, that the thing that they're looking for relief from is also self-created. So it's all thought in the moment, as somebody observed earlier in the call. It's all thought in the moment. But there is a point where, and even where that point sits might be up for debate, but there is a point where it tips into something, this loss of control phenomenon occurs. And I often think of it's a bit like, you know, some people can develop type 2 diabetes as a result of the diet, and they might be eating because they believe food will comfort them, and particularly eating high carb foods. But there is a point where it becomes its own thing. Now, it's not, as you say, it's not your identity. But I've never been comfortable with the sort of denial around that, you know, and that's one of the areas where I anticipated there might be some discomfort, some kickback in the three principles community, that you know, the less we understand how the human operating system works, the more we're caught up in our thinking, then, you know, stress of any sort can exacerbate physical symptoms. But just because you get an insight into the principles doesn't mean that whatever thresholds have been crossed via stress, drinking, eating the wrong kind of food, it doesn't mean that those automatically disappear. Now they may disappear, and there's every hope, but it's just treating the thing that has happened with some respect, I think, has been important to me. You know, it just and I felt very comfortable at the you know, in what we were writing, that there was an integrity to it that did respect that, you know, just how devastating the consequences of addiction can be, or drug or alcohol abuse, whatever it is. So yeah, I felt it was important to acknowledge that.
I know Mike had a
Mike.
question or comment there.
Mike, shall I unmute you? You're unmuted.
Hi, Mike.
Oh, he's disappeared. Oh, there he is. There he is. Mike, are you still?
Hear me? I haven't got this. Sorry. I can hear me now.
There you go. Now we can hear you.
Hi, everybody. Anyways, hi, everybody.
Hi, Mike.
I'm reasonably new to the principles, but I have a bit of a question, really, for Christian and Bob. Anybody else in here? I've been 38 years clean and sober. I've recently gone back to AA after about 14 years because my daughter developed an addiction. An alcoholic is not who I am, but it's something that I have. Now, the reason that I'm sort of going around the trees on this is because everybody that I've spoke to on 3Ps has told me that I can drink. Now, if I was or did not have the amount of recovery that I have, and I love the 3Ps and what they're saying, I do get a lot, don't get me wrong, but if I wasn't just as strong as I am in my own recovery, I could have taken that. And I had a discussion with somebody today in the 3Ps that has a drink problem themselves, and they're telling me that I can drink, you know, and I don't know who was counseling who in the end, to be honest with you, you know. So really, I'm just wanting to know where you are coming from on this, because I know certainly for me, drinking is, I mean, drink isn't, or drugs aren't a part of my life today. I do not think about alcohol or drugs at all. You know, the obsession has gone totally. I get on with my life. I have my own spiritual practice. I've had a good career. And I've actually, after staying away from meetings for 14 years, because in a way, I actually felt that in the end, the fellowship was holding me back. But I've gone back now with a fresh light, with taking my daughter, and I'm actually seeing it differently, and I'm feeling the love in the rooms. And but I don't need to go, not like the early years of getting clean and sober, you know. But I don't know. I'm thinking that maybe some of the information that I've been given is pretty misguided to say that, you know, I could go out and drink, because if I went out and drank tonight, and I've been told a few people this, you know, you'll be watching me on the evening news tomorrow night, you know, because when I drink, I'm crazy. I ended up in prison. I've been dead twice, you know, and that's with alcohol and drugs. And anyways, I'm going to shut up at that, because I would just like to know where everybody else is coming from on this, because I love the 3Ps. I totally love that everything comes from thought. Yes, absolutely. But I don't know. It's misguided to tell especially somebody that's early days in recovery, to say that you can go out and drink, because I would have loved that, because that would have justified me going back out there. Anyways, I'll leave it at that and see what the feedback is.
You want to take that one, Christian?
I'll go first, and then you. I'm totally in agreement with you, Mike. I think it's I think I would never say that to somebody. And for me, it's a bit like, it's like smoking. You wouldn't say, oh, now that you know the 3 Ps, you can smoke in safety. It's just I do respect that people can make their own decisions on that, but I do not suggest that the 3 principles has had any effect on the abnormal reaction to drink that I was having by the end of my drinking. So it makes no sense. It'd be like playing Russian roulette for me to take a drink. And this is one of, I guess it's part of the motivation for me, Barbara, I don't know about you, in writing this book, because I hear that kind of thing as well. And it seems, it doesn't sit comfortably with me at all. And it's not that I want to tell other people what to do, but it's just that the idea that it's like saying to someone, you've got the 3 principles, so now you no longer have you no longer have a sort of nut allergy. I mean, it's just like, you don't know that. I mean, it's a non sequitur. So yeah,
Mike, I think that is a big piece of why we wrote the book. I really do. I think it was to really take very seriously. Sorry, Christian, I know I interrupted you, and I also am mindful of the time, but we really wanted to get the message out there that this is a very serious condition for people. And yes, this understanding can just help your recovery in ways that is mind-boggling. But we really, wanted to put out a very different message. And I think that goes back to some of Sheila's comments. We wanted to make it very clear. Addiction is no joke. Let's not mess around with this. We're going to call it what it is. And, that's why we really tackled it hard. And I think both of our perspectives, both Christian having lived it and myself having worked with so many people over the years, we really, in anticipation of the conference coming up, we wanted to get this voice out there in no uncertain terms. So, I really hope any of you who read the book will let us know what you think, and let us know how we did, if we hit our mark. And we really do appreciate that feedback. But that's precisely, I think, why we approached it in the way we approached it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great question, Mike, and thanks, because I think it's important to name these difficult, rather than these difficult issues, and just to get clear. And I really appreciate you sharing that.
No, thank you. But I mean, because one person actually did say, bring your daughter to our 3 Ps meeting, and they disagree with me. I says, no, I says, she needs identification at the moment, she needs to go to an AA meeting.
Follow your wisdom, Mike. Follow your wisdom.
I did, Barbara. I did, absolutely. Yeah. She's doing great. She's doing great. And I'm quite sure at some point I will introduce her to the 3 Ps, I think it really will help her.
Yeah.
But she needs to get sober and stop drinking.
Take a look at the book and see what you think. Let us know. I'd love to know.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for your advice. Thank you. You've cleared a lot up in my mind. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Barbara. Catherine, too, for the wisdom piece. I saw that. Yeah, it really is, again, no one size fits all, but we need to follow our wisdom. We need to know we have wisdom to be able to follow, so sorry.
Yeah. I was just going to say, Barbara, we are coming towards the end of the time, and I was just going to invite you to sort of close us out, as it were.
Yeah. Just a reminder of the conference coming up. 3 Principles Conference in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota in May. We're really excited about this and bringing together people from all over the world who will join in this conversation and, hopefully advance the cause that will strengthen people's program, whatever that is, and help them to find freedom and joy and peace that resides for all of us beneath the surface of all our thinking. So
yeah, and for those of you who it'd be lovely to see as many of you as are interested over there, and there is also a live stream if you're in the UK and it's just too far to travel. So yeah. Well, listen, Barbara, thank you so much again for everything, but particularly for tonight. It just felt to me as though it's been a really engaged discussion, and some nice comments on the messages there. Thank you, everybody else who's joined us. The recording will go up probably tomorrow now, and it's lovely to see you all. And if you do have any questions, comments, or anything else, we're both very open to it. All our details, our contact details will be there too. So thanks again, and good night, everybody. Well, good night here from Scotland.
good night, everybody.
Ha!
Hope
Bye.
to hear from you again.